So on the agenda today, we actually don't have a very big agenda. We just have updates on action items, and we also have a brief link out update. Then we want to talk a little bit about features for DataMed version 3. I guess when I say DataMed version 3, I don't mean version 3 itself. I just mean that these are the next set of features that we'd like to incorporate into DataMed, and that could get potentially incorporated in whatever versions that are released going up. And and with that, I think that's what we're going to be tracking moving forward for the remaining part of when we work on the next release. And if there are any other updates from team members, then we can talk about that. So on the before I get started, in the room here I have Firat, Ergen, Reeling, Shaoling, Trevor, and Kirk. And on the call I have Diana, Elizabeth, Ian, Nansu, Nina, Ron, Tim, and Wei Wei. Did I miss anybody? And Huni told me she won't be able to join in the call because I think she's stuck at an airport somewhere. And Fawaz, since it's spring break this week for us, Fawaz not in today as well. So since Ron said he would be there for only a short time, I wanted to take this time to say not goodbye, but see you later, or talk to you guys again soon, to both Reeling and Ron. This is the last CDT meeting for both of them. Reeling is going to be moving to Dallas next week. She starts. It's for both of them.
Well, thank you all. I mean, this has been great working with all of you. You've done, as far as I can see, absolutely outstanding work. And DataMed is something that is very real and very functional. And I just hope you're able to further develop it and get some good connections to the community that can help you to make it even better.
Thanks, Ron.
Yeah, and I also want to thank everyone in the group. BioCat is a great experience to me, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Thanks, Reeling. Reeling is going to go join Amazon, so anybody who wants anything from Amazon should contact her.
She promised to give for free.
So anyway, moving on. So for in terms of the action items, the FAQ page is almost completed. I think there's just some technical details that we want to go over again before we upload it on the DataMed website. I was hoping to talk to Jeff to ask him with regard to the reindexing of all the repositories with the updated NLP pipeline. We had a meeting with Jeff and his team and also Huni last week.
Really? Not
Huni was also on the call.
No, just really.
You link?
Yeah, that's not him.
I thought she was on the call too. Because didn't we talk about, this was for
data set ID?
Yeah, right. This was for a discussion where we wanted to resolve how we would. So right now, for some of the functionalities that we are doing on the UI, and we were using the Elasticsearch ID, so we wanted to kind of resolve what IDs we need to use, and what would be the best option for us. So we talked about that, and we also talked a little bit about the NLP pipeline and potentially additional stuff that would be added on to the ingestion pipeline by Jeff's team. So we talked about that in the meeting. And then as for EMEA submissions, we have 2 poster abstracts and 2 podium abstracts from DataMed this year. The next thing is for a data type ontology work that Philippe and Alejandra are going to be doing, and to do that, we decided that we would have a meeting that would be arranged after version 2 release. And Philippe and Alejandra were away last week at a bioschemas meeting, so this week we are going to have that, or I'm going to have to set up the meeting for Philippe and Alejandra to talk with the relevant folks. Also today, Xiaoling, Firat, and Ruling had a meeting with Alejandra with regard to the schema.org annotation. So do you guys want to just update? One of you can update what you talked about and what was decided.
We just talk about the includes.
Want me to speak up a little bit?
Step by step, we should include first the data set in the schema.org data set. So we will continue with the other variables.
So this morning, Alejandra showed us how to work on the convert the dataset information from the search results to the schema.org, and then we will work on the function to put it in our website. Then the Google can search our DataMed each dataset in the schema.org.
And how long will this take?
I think it won't take long to implement it. So the important thing was getting the search results before rendering the page or after in the middle of the page, where we are getting the results before rendering the page, so it will be easy to embed it in the head bar.
So there's one aspect of this, well, a couple of aspects of this. First of all, if we do the schema.org markup on the pages, it's not the case that Google will just crawl the site, because most of the pages on DataMed don't actually get generated until somebody actually does a search and gets a result.
Yes, it will get dynamic, yeah.
So, and this is something that came up in the meeting last week, and I was glad to see that they were emphasizing the importance of a sitemap file or a set of sitemap files and making those available. So what that has the opportunity to do is to enumerate all of the potential pages that the site could generate, and therefore Google will look at that, and it would then generate all of those pages and index them. Now, I think obviously that's going to be millions of pages for BioCaddy, and I think we want to validate that this is how it will work. But without that, it won't actually, what we're actually looking for there won't actually happen.
Yeah, we already have a set map on DataMed website, but we probably need to update it.
What pages does it list?
All the pages, like the search result page and the data item page for every data set.
Okay, so it's a big file.
Yeah, but we probably need to update it because we have some new data sets.
So every time we update our index, we should update that file too.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, any time there's a new entry of any kind and a potential new page, then it should be added. Though from having looked at a sitemap, at the sitemap specification, there are ways that you can specify it so that Google knows only to have to crawl the new stuff. It doesn't have to recrawl the old stuff. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure you'll work out what's appropriate by looking at the documentation of the sitemap. The other thing that's not clear, I mean, if that file already exists, Google will already be crawling those pages, even if they don't have schema.org markup in them. And one of the interesting things that it would be good to know about is, well, what difference does it make to the way Google indexes those pages if they contain that schema.org markup? And it's not clear to me what difference it's going to make, because Google doesn't actually offer any structured search according to those particular attributes. And presumably everything that's going to be in schema.org markup of the page, it's on the web page anyway, it's just not tagged in a particular way.
So if we have the schema.org information in the header, then we define that this page is about data set in the schema.org. So when Google crawl it, it will recognize this as a data set. If we don't have the schema.org, then the Google may not recognize it as a data set.
Right, but to be honest with you, I'm not sure what difference that even makes to when Google crawls it.
So the sitemap only helps Google crawl the pages, but for the schema.org, it will provide more metadata information about our pages. So for example, like if you have a recipe website.
Yeah, no, I understand what the markup does. It's not, what I'm saying, it's not clear to me how Google actually uses that. I mean, it's not like I can go and do a specific search for a data set. I mean, though Google indexes recipes in the way that you say, it doesn't anywhere provide an application that lets you search on that specific metadata. So.
But if it's indexed those specific metadata for the recipe, then I guess when you search, your results should pop up higher, right? Mm-hmm. If your search was specific enough, or if it contained multiple terms that come from the metadata.
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice to think that, but I'm not sure that it's true. And I'm saying, just doing this on trust that that's what happens, I'm not sure. I think we need a slightly more critical approach to it.
We could, one option is for us to see if there's any documentation with regard to how
Google indexes,
how it will use the schema.org markup. The other option is maybe we can ask Alejandra and Felipe, because they know a couple of people at Google, right, who are doing this. So we can ask them.
I'm basing this on having heard Dan Brickley from Google talk last week. Right, I was at that meeting also, and at the meeting last year in Barcelona, and they're not going to solve this community's problems. There's probably not much further we can get with this conversation in this discussion. I think we need we need to look more carefully at how we're using schema.org and what approach makes sense. The other thing that I think I sent an email about it, Anu, to you and Jeff and Hua, is we heard last week that DataCite, is already publishing schema.org.
Right.
So the question there is what would that mean for BioCaddy as being a consumer of schema.org? So at the moment we get data site metadata one way, but they're actually providing it through another. And Google are not going to build the application for search of biomedical data sets. That's something that we, NIH, Elixir, the biomedical community will have to do. And sure, we can use schema.org and bioschemas to do that, but I think we should also be looking at that aspect. And hearing about that last week was a useful piece of news that DataCite are making the data available that way.
Okay.
So I would suggest at some point we need probably a more dedicated discussion about schema.org and a strategy with regard to it.
I would suggest that we do it when probably Jeff is on the call and as well as Alejandra and Philippe. I think.
I would agree.
So, with reference to link out, if you remember, we did do link out or linked some repository information on PubMed as a link out service, and so Xiaoling reviewed it after we released version 2. Do you want to go over it, Xiaoling?
Yeah. So the reason we want to go over this is like February, the month of February, we only get one hit from the link out to DataMed. So I go over all the information we submit to link out. So for the DataMed 2.0, there are 64 repositories, and 9 of them have PMID information. But for 9 of them, 4 of them, the link out does not want to include in our submission because like the PDB, GO, Bioproject, UniProt, they already include in the NCBI. So they don't want the user to click from the publication to DataMed and then DataMed click back to the NCBI. So we only submit like 5 repositories in the link out submission. And these 5 repositories does not include lots of data sets. And get rid of the duplicate PMID, so totally we only have 587 unique PMID. So PubMed has like millions of publications, but we only have 500 has linked to DataMed. So that's, yeah, I think that's the reason why there's so few hits. And after the DataMed 2.0, we have included more repository and some updates of index, and we have one more repository have PMID. So we can update this when we include it in the UI. We update in the UI, so I will update the link out submission.
So do we need to let them know?
Yeah, after I prepare the file, I submit to the FTP, and then I need to let the KC know. Yeah.
Okay. So every time we have new repositories, then we want to make sure that we check.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the most surprising thing there is that 9 out of 64 of only 9 out of 64 have PubMed ID information. And I'm going to guess that doesn't mean only 9 out of 64 link to or have information about the publication for the data.
There are few.
It's just that they don't the PubMed ID to identify it.
Yeah, there are few more repositories, like maybe 2 or 3 repositories have publication information, but they are not in PubMed ID. They are DOI identified.
Is there a way with those to work out what the PubMed ID is? I mean, clearly that can't be a manual task, but is there a lookup one could do to find the PubMed ID?
Yeah, we need to take a look. I need to take a look and then see if we can figure out a way to convert it. Then if yes, then we can add more PMID in the submission.
So one of the things we've been talking about with Jeff is to see if we could have some of the publication information done at the indexing side, right? So to actually have Jeff's team pull in titles instead of just PMID, to pull in the titles, abstracts, etc., author names, etc., and index those, so we could add maybe some additional functionalities, which would speed up some of the searching that we can do on the UI side. So what maybe we can ask Jeff is whether they can use the DOI to pull in PMID using the PubMed API or something like that.
Yeah.
And see if we can enrich.
Okay. I can send Jeff an email about it. Yeah.
Figure that out. But also a lot of the repositories, I mean, about 30 or 32 repositories are data site repositories, and that has really very minimal metadata. So as and when we actually, for example, we did the import via DataCite first, but now we have much more enriched metadata because we've indexed import directly, right? So I think, and the same is true for SimTK, where we went via DataCite earlier, and now we are indexing it directly. So probably we have more enriched metadata, and we may have more information then.
So that was helpful in understanding, because I couldn't remember. Because I know what we did was kind of experimental. That's helpful in reviewing this. And so it's actually the case that for those repositories that have the information and those records that have PubMed IDs, all of it is indexed. So I think the other question in regard to so few hits is whether we're actually pointing anybody or enlisting anybody to evaluate this functionality and comment on its usefulness. So I think we might want to identify ways of doing that. Might want to set up some specific tests for that.
One of the things we could potentially do is we can ask, since Ram is running user testing right now, we can ask him to find out if users think that's a useful feature to have, because that would then come from outside resources and not from anybody from the team, right?
Yeah, I think given we'd have to point them to some specific publications in PubMed to take a look at, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise they search around PubMed and they might look forever and never find any of this.
I was thinking more in general terms to find out if any of them would ever, I mean, I'm sure there are publications they could look at which are coming not necessarily via DataCite, but via the other not via DataMed, but via the other ones, to see if any of them ever go via link out to the repositories themselves. I just wondered if that's something that, I don't know how many people actually use that route. So we can ask them, we can also pull up specific examples to see if users find it useful if they're looking for the information from PubMed, to have the link out to DataMed. So we generated a short list of features and some testing that we are doing in terms of what we want to do before version 3. So as and when we are getting things done, we will actually have releases, multiple releases in between. This was already discussed. These could be mini releases, and we will have some of these features getting updated during those times. So one of the things that we have been doing is in terms of documentation. So reeling and shoveling for the ingestion and indexing side, Burak had documentation written out, and there was kind of an independent testing at our end, where when Ruling was implementing the pipelines, we realized what's not explicitly stated in the documentation, and so we are refining that. In terms of the UI, we haven't had any such testing. So what we are doing right now is Firat, since he's new to the project, is actually setting up an instance of DataMed on a completely new server all by himself, and based on the documentation that we have, so we can make the documentation much more comprehensive and clear for any outside individual or entity that wants to implement it. Shouldn't have any problems, and it's all self-explanatory. So he's going to start. We just got the VM.
Yes, we just got the VM.
VM now, so he will start working on that. So some of the things are just lists that we did because for our own, how should I say, tracking, to make sure that we learned everything before Ruling left of all the necessary stuff for DataMed that she had been taking care of. And we also made a list of the features that were pulled out from the issues in GitHub. So one of the things was to add a way to search common fund repositories, or we also discussed maybe letting users define their own repository list, which would be basically if users have a set of repositories that they typically search, then they could generate that and add that as a group and be able to search only within that group instead of searching through the whole set of repositories that we have. In functionality, it would be very similar to the common fund, except that we would be defining the common fund ourselves, and in the other way, we will let the users define the common fund. Define the repository list. We also are working on the additional filters. So for a lot of the feature lists that we have here are on the UI end, except for probably four or five that actually is on the ingestion and indexing side. So one is we had worked earlier on the autocomplete on search page, and we decided not to use this feature because we were having some problems in IE. So I think we are going to go back and explore it, fix the problem, and we will incorporate that back on the search page. We also want to set up a system where if a link is broken, instead of letting a user click on the link and taking them to a broken page, we will let them know on DataMed itself that the link is broken. And then once it's fixed, then we update our pages saying that it's fixed. For metadata mapping, ingestion, and repository expansion, I think we need Jeff on the call, but we want to decide the minimum number of repositories we want to update, that we want to get indexed before the end of the project. So this is something that I think we'll come back to in terms of discussion. This has already been done. I need to mark that as done. With adding disease as a field in advanced search, this is completed already. We are also, one of the high priorities, I think, is to have APIs to allow users to programmatically access DataMed. And this would include not only accessing Elasticsearch, but would also be able to access the additional functions that we have on the UI. So we need to do it from the UI end. Since we have the tracking system or the user tracking system now implemented on the UI, we also plan to have the most accessed dataset information displayed. This is something that was in our original list of features that we want to provide. So this is one of the features, and we would be working on the common data elements. I think this would be more on in terms of a proof of principle work that George is leading. So they're working on the markup, and what we, I guess, would be working with them is to have searching capabilities and also have some ways of or discussions about how we would display it on the UI. In terms of FAQs and other documentation, we will be working on that. For the timelines, for some visualization work, we have implemented the timeline chart, but in the plan we have the word cloud that needs to be implemented. This word cloud is dependent on the NLP service that we have. So as soon as Jeff's team runs the NLP pipeline with all the repositories, I think we should be able to implement this very quickly. We already talked about the tracking system. So visualization or analysis of results that come out of the tracking system is what Diwakar and Xiaoling are going to be working on. An additional feature that we want to add in, which is to have alerts to new results from saved searches that the user has. And in order to be able to do that, we talked about being able to have timestamps for each data set that's available that's put in during ingestion and indexing, and we talked about this already. So I think Jeff's team is going to be doing that. What we will be working on the UI end is to have users sign up for this feature and also work on systems that will send emails to users with updated results. The other three parts is integration of pilot projects. I think that we haven't focused too much on it yet, so we will start working with the pilot project 4.1 through 4.3, and since this is potentially the integration would be at the back end, Jeff's team would probably be the folks that would be doing this integration. With the challenge results, we had about 8 teams that submitted, or 10 teams that submitted that responded to the challenge and submitted the results. And of the 10 teams, 9 of them actually submitted a document that detailed what methods they used. So Kirk and Xiaoling would be looking into how we could incorporate the methods, if it made sense for us to incorporate it into DataMed. So we will have 2 subcontracts for 2 of the teams. So obviously we will be working way closer with those 2 teams, but information from the other 7 teams is also going to be scanned and reviewed to see if there's anything of interest that we could potentially include into DataMed and whether it would improve DataMed's performance. And in terms of link out, we just had updates, so Xiaoling will take care of that. And then there are, the rest of them are essentially just for us to review these issues again and to determine exactly what we want to do with the issues, if we want to do anything at all. So these are really the major items, I think, for us for now before we have version 3 release.
So thanks, Anu. That's a fairly comprehensive list. Given I think it would be particularly timely given the change in BD2K and the fact that all of the projects in BD2K are being looked at to understand, what value they provide. There seems to me there would be an opportunity, and one of the emphases that's been placed on that is the extent to which there's dissemination and engagement of the user community and particularly a focus on usability. So I think there are multiple ways we could do this, and we could all think about how we could do it, but some way in getting community input on this list, and I think that would mean describing these things in slightly more detail than is in this spreadsheet so people could understand what they were. Or we may even want to think about, well, let's have a presentation where you could run through each of these features so people would get a good understanding of what they are and to get some broad set of input. As far as DataMed 3.0 goes, I think it would, at this point, it would be very well received, and it would do DataMed BioCaddy a great deal of good in terms of being seen to, engaging the community, not just being seen to do it, but the fact that it's a reality.
So Ian, I'm not sure I understand. So the community that
what I mean is we've got a list of functions, right?
Right.
The question of having a wider discussion about the list of functions rather than just on a call like this that involves the core development team. So
would you have an idea of who the audience would be for this?
I mean, I would make it available, open to anyone who wanted to get engaged, anyone who's used DataMed and might have opinions about what the valuable functions would be, to the extent of putting some of this to a vote and finding out which are the most popular functions, which people would find most useful.
Okay.
we could talk more offline about ways that we might do that.
Sure. Okay, then I'll probably email you, and we can carry on the discussion. So besides this, of course, we have the source code. Please do deposit all your source code in GitHub. We will and also make sure that your source code is well documented and well annotated. And that's about it for today. Is there anything else that we need to talk about?
I just wanted to comment and recognize I'd made the point before about when we put stuff in GitHub, making sure that the application can actually be built. And I think in a call since then, the point has been made that the Linux team had been able to build BioCaddy. So that's a good indication that what's in there, at least the team that's sort of well, tooled up and able to use GitHub and that knows what they're doing, was able to take the code and get it running, which is great. So, well done.
Thanks, Ian. So if there's nothing else that we want to talk about, then we'll talk again next week. Thank you all.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.